Dark city streets, headlights flashing. A girl stands alone, selling oranges, her eyes tired yet defiant. A luxury car stops. The window rolls down. A man watches her, curiosity burning in his gaze. She sold oranges to survive. He bought them to understand her. But love, that was never part of the deal. Until it became the only thing that mattered. What happens when a millionaire falls for a girl who has nothing but her pride? Is love enough to bridge two worlds? Or is fate about to play its cruelest trick? The street bustled with cars and hurried footsteps. Amidst the chaos, a girl stood near the traffic light, her small basket of oranges glowing under the sun. Her hands were rough, her clothes simple, but her eyes held an unshakable fire. Tina. Tina, calling out, fresh oranges. Sweet and juicy. Just $1. James rolled down the window of his black Rolls-Royce. His sharp suit and expensive watch screamed wealth, but his eyes softened when they met Tina's. There was something in her, something raw, something real. James, curious, how much for all the oranges? Tina, raising a brow, why? You planning to open a juice shop? James smirked, amused by her boldness. James. Maybe. But I'd rather hear your story first. Tina, guarded, my story isn't for sale. A honk from behind forced James to move, but as he drove off, he glanced at his rearview mirror, watching Tina disappear into the crowd. He had everything money could buy, yet for the first time he wanted something different. He wanted to know her. Little did he know, buying those oranges would be the smallest price he'd pay for falling in love with her. James couldn't get her out of his mind. He had met countless women, models, socialites, business tycoons' daughters, but none had looked at him the way she did. Not with admiration, not with greed. Just indifference. And that intrigued him. The next evening, James found himself driving down the same street. The moment he saw her standing in her usual spot, a strange relief washed over him. James, rolling down the window, still not out of business. Tina turned, her brows furrowing as she recognized him. Tina. You again. James, smirking, miss me. Tina, crossing her arms. You're blocking my customers. James chuckled and stepped out of the car, shocking her. He walked up to her, hands in his pockets, towering over her small stall of oranges. James. All right, tell me. Why oranges? Tina, hesitant because they sell. James. Not a good enough answer. Tina, sighing because they remind me of someone. Her voice softened, and for the first time, James noticed something beneath her tough exterior, pain. He wanted to ask more, but a sudden loud honk from behind them broke the moment. Tina flinched, shaking her head as if pushing away a memory. Tina, grabbing an orange and tossing it to him. Here. Consider it an answer. James caught it effortlessly, staring at the fruit in his hand. He could buy the most expensive delicacies in the world, yet this orange felt like the rarest thing he'd ever held. James. Then I guess I'll keep coming back for more answers. Tina, rolling her eyes. Rich guys. Always thinking everything has a price. She turned away, but James smiled. This wasn't over. Not even close. Little did he know, Tina's past was a mystery that would soon pull him into a world he never expected. A world where love was not just about the heart, but survival. For the next few days, James kept coming back. Sometimes he bought an orange, sometimes he just stood there, watching her work, trying to figure her out. And each time, Tina remained the same. Distant, guarded, but undeniably intriguing. But tonight, something was different. The street was quieter than usual. A cold breeze rustled through the air as James parked his car. He expected to see Tina in her usual spot. But she wasn't there. Instead, her basket of oranges lay scattered on the ground, some rolling into the road. A strange unease gripped his chest. James, muttering to himself, where is she? Just then he spotted her, a few feet away, pressed against a wall. A man stood in front of her, his face shadowed by the dim streetlight. His voice was low, menacing. Stranger. You think selling oranges will make you disappear? You can't run forever, Tina. James clenched his fists. Without thinking, he strode forward. James, firmly, is there a problem here? The stranger turned, his sharp eyes narrowing at James. Tina's face paled. Tina, quickly stay out of this, James. But James wasn't the type to walk away. James, to the stranger she said no. That means you leave. The man let out a dry chuckle, stepping back but keeping his gaze locked on Tina. Stranger, smirking. You can buy oranges from her, rich boy. But you can't buy the truth. And just like that, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving an unsettling silence behind. James turned to Tina, but she was already picking up her basket, avoiding his eyes. James. Who was that? What did he mean? Tina, forcing a smile, nothing. Just someone from the past. James, studying her. You're a terrible liar. Tina, quietly. And you asked too many questions. She turned to leave, but James wasn't done. He reached out, gently grabbing her wrist. James. Tina, if you're in trouble, I can help. She looked at him, then really looked at him, like she was trying to decide whether to trust him or not. For a moment, James swore he saw fear in her eyes. But then, just as quickly, she masked it. Tina, softly. Not everything can be fixed with money, James. She pulled away, disappearing into the night, leaving James standing there, holding nothing but an orange and 1,000 questions. But one thing was clear. Tina was hiding something. And James wasn't about to walk away until he found out what. James couldn't sleep that night. Tina's words echoed in his mind. Not everything can be fixed with money. That was new. People always saw his wealth as the solution to their problems. But Tina, she was different. And that made him want to know more. The next evening he returned. But Tina wasn't there. A strange sense of worry crawled up his spine. He asked a nearby fruit vendor. James. The girl who sells oranges here. Have you seen her today? Vendor, shaking his head, she left early. Looked scared. Scared. James' jaw tightened. Who was that man from last night? What was Tina running from? Meanwhile, Tina sat on the rooftop of a half-broken building, her basket beside her. The wind played with her hair as she hugged her knees, staring at the dark sky. She thought she had escaped her past. She thought she was safe. But she was wrong. That man, he had found her. Suddenly her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated but answered. Mysterious voice, coldly. Did you really think you could disappear, Tina? Her heart pounded. Tina, whispering, leave me alone. Mysterious voice. Not until you return what was taken. Tina, shaking. I don't have it anymore. A chuckle on the other end. Mysterious voice. Then you better find it before someone else pays the price. The call ended. Tina's hands trembled. She had tried so hard to build a new life, to stay invisible. But now she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting to protect the only person left in her life. She had no choice. She had to leave. The next day, James arrived at the usual spot, but instead of Tina, he found her basket empty. A single note was tucked inside. Don't look for me. His fingers curled around the paper, a sharp determination lighting in his eyes. James, muttering, too late, Tina. I'm already looking. And he wasn't stopping until he found her. James clenched the note in his hand. Tina was running from something, no, someone. And he couldn't ignore the way that thought unsettled him. He had met thousands of women, all drawn to his wealth, his name, his power. But Tina, she wasn't impressed by any of it. That's why she was different. That's why he couldn't let her disappear. James, muttering to himself, you don't get to just walk away, Tina. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing a business deal, a luxury, or a trophy wife. He was chasing her, a girl who had nothing but her pride and a basket of oranges. Meanwhile, Tina sat in a tiny motel room, gripping her phone. She had tried to stay away, but her mind kept drifting back. To James, to the way he looked at her like she was more than just a street vendor, more than just a girl with a past. She had learned long ago that love wasn't for people like her. But then why did she miss him? A knock on the door snapped her out of her thoughts. Her heart stopped. She tiptoed toward the door, her breath shallow. Who had found her? Slowly, she unlocked it, and her eyes widened. Tina shocked James. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking utterly unfazed, like he hadn't just tracked her down like a man on a mission. James, calmly. You told me not to look for you. So, of course I had to. Tina, frustrated. James, you don't understand. James, interrupting. Then make me understand. Tina swallowed hard. She wanted to push him away, but the way he looked at her, like she wasn't just a runaway girl but his girl, made her heart ache. James, softly. Tina, I don't care about your past. I don't care if you don't have money, a big house, or a perfect life. I just need one thing. Tina, whispering. What? James. A woman who actually loves me. Not my bank account. Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said that to her before. Not once. She had spent her life believing she had nothing to offer, but here was a man, a millionaire, saying that all he wanted was her. Suddenly, the fear in her heart wasn't just about the past catching up to her. It was about the future. Could she let herself love him? Could she believe, just this once, that love didn't come with a price? Before she could answer, a loud crash outside made them both freeze. The past wasn't done with her yet. And now James was in danger too. A loud crash echoed outside the motel, shattering the fragile moment between them. James instantly moved in front of Tina. His instincts sharp. James, firmly, stay behind me. Tina's heart pounded. She knew this wasn't random. Someone had followed her. And now, James was caught in the storm of a past she had fought so hard to escape. A shadow moved outside the window. Then a voice, low, menacing. Mysterious voice. Tina. You really thought you could run forever? James's jaw tightened. He recognized that voice. It was the same man from the street that night. The one who had threatened Tina. James, coldly, who the hell are you? The door shook as the man tried to force his way in. Tina, whispering, terrified, James, you need to go. This isn't your fight. James, without hesitation. I'm not leaving you, Tina. She looked at him, stunned. No one had ever chosen to stand beside her before. No one had ever fought for her. And here was James, one of the most powerful men in the city, willing to risk everything for a poor orange seller. A second later, James pulled out his phone and made a call. James, to the phone. Get to the Hillcrest Motel. Now. Tina didn't know who he was talking to, but she could tell from his tone that whoever was coming was powerful. The banging on the door grew louder. James grabbed Tina's hand and pulled her to the side, away from the entrance. James, softly, trust me. She hesitated for a second, then nodded. A moment later, the door burst open and the man stormed in. But before he could take a step forward, 3 men in black suits appeared behind him, grabbing him instantly. Tina's eyes widened. James had called his security. James, to the man, voice like steel. You made a mistake coming after her. The man struggled, but James's men tightened their grip. Tina, whispering, he won't stop, James. James, turning to her, voice full of determination. Then I won't either. Tina's breath caught. No one had ever stood up for her like this. No one had ever stayed. James stepped closer, tilting her chin up. James, softly. I don't want a rich woman, Tina. I don't need status, money, or power. I just need you. Her heart clenched. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. For the first time in her life, someone was telling her she was enough. Tina, whispering, James. But before she could say anything more, the man being held back let out a dark laugh. Mysterious man. You think this is over, James Carter? You have no idea what she's hiding. James glanced at Tina, seeing the fear in her eyes. He didn't care about her past. He didn't care about the danger. He had already made his choice. James, to his security, take him. I want to know everything about who sent him. As the man was dragged away, James turned back to Tina. James, gently. You don't have to run anymore, Tina. Not alone. Tina stared at him, her heart warring between fear and something even more terrifying, hope. She had spent her whole life surviving. Could she finally let herself live with him? Tina sat on the motel bed, her hands still trembling from the encounter. James stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, giving sharp orders to his security team. He was handling the situation like he handled everything, with control, confidence, and power. But when he turned to her, his expression softened. James, gently, it's over for now. You're safe. Safe. She had never truly felt that before. But somehow, with him, she did. Tina swallowed hard, her heart beating faster than it should. She had spent so long keeping people away. But James wasn't like anyone else. He wasn't just protecting her, he cared. And that scared her more than anything. Tina, softly. Why are you doing this, James? He frowned, stepping closer. James. Because I care about you, Tina. Tina, shaking her head, but why? I'm not like the women in your world. I don't belong there. James, firmly, who said I want those women? You think I don't see the way they look at me? Like I'm a trophy, a bank account, a business deal? But you. He crouched in front of her, his warm hand covering hers. James, softly. You look at me like I'm just a man. And for the first time, that's all I want to be. Tina's breath hitched. No one had ever made her feel like she was enough. But James, he saw her. Not as a poor orange seller, not as a girl with a troubled past, but as Tina. She had fought so hard not to fall, but she was already slipping, falling into him, into his warmth, into the feeling she had buried deep for so long. Tina, whispering, James. I'm scared. James, cupping her face. Then let me be the one thing in your life you don't have to be scared of. Tina closed her eyes, feeling his touch, his presence. And for the first time in years, she didn't want to run. She wanted him. Slowly, she leaned in, her forehead resting against his. Tina, softly, I think. I'm falling for you. A slow smile curved on James's lips as he whispered against her skin. James. Then fall, Tina. I'll catch you. And for the first time in her life, she let herself believe it. The air between them was thick with emotions neither of them could deny anymore. Tina had spent her life running, afraid to trust, afraid to love. But James. He made her feel something she had never felt before, safe. And now, for the first time, she wasn't afraid to fall. She lifted her gaze to his, her fingers tightening around his. Tina, softly. What if loving me puts you in danger, James? James, without hesitation. Then I'll fight whatever comes. You're worth it, Tina. Her heart clenched. No one had ever fought for her before. She had always been alone, always relying on herself. But James was proving over and over again that she didn't have to be. Suddenly, James's phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he checked the message. James, muttering, damn it. Tina, worried, what happened? James, sighing, the man from earlier. He wasn't working alone. There's someone bigger behind this, and they want something from you. Tina swallowed hard. She knew exactly what they wanted. And she knew that if she stayed with James, they wouldn't stop coming after him either. Tina, whispering, James, James, firmly. Don't even think about telling me to walk away, Tina. I'm not leaving you. She looked at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. He wasn't just saying it, he meant it. James gently took her hands in his. James, softly. I don't care about your past. I don't care what you're running from. All I care about is you. And if I have to fight the whole damn world to keep you safe, then I will. Tina's breath hitched. This wasn't just words. This was love. Slowly she reached up, resting her palm against his cheek. Tina whispering, "I don't deserve you, James." James smiling slightly, "That's where you're wrong. I don't want a perfect woman, I don't want a rich woman. I just want you." Tina closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to believe it. And in that moment she knew she loved him. Fully, deeply, recklessly. Tina murmuring, "I love you, James." A slow, breathtaking smile spread across his lips. James whispering, "Say it again." She smiled through her tears, her fingers tangling in his shirt as she pulled him closer. "Tina, I love you." And then finally she gave in, falling into his arms, into his kiss, into a love she never thought she'd have. But as they held each other, lost in their own world, neither of them noticed the shadow lurking outside the motel window, watching, waiting. The danger wasn't over. And soon, their love would be put to the ultimate test. The night was silent, but James felt it, the eerie stillness before a storm. He tightened his hold on Tina as they sat by the window, her head resting against his chest. She was finally allowing herself to love him, to trust him. But danger still lurked in the shadows. His phone buzzed. A message from his security team. "Unknown threat identified. They're coming for her." James clenched his jaw. He had expected this. Whoever was after Tina wasn't done yet. And if they thought they could take her away from him, they were dead wrong. The attack. Around midnight, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. A black SUV stopped outside the motel. Men in dark suits stepped out, their faces unreadable, their intentions clear. Tina whispering, panicked, "James, it's them." James firmly, "I know. Stay behind me." Before the men could reach their door, James's own security team emerged from the shadows. A standoff. One of the men stepped forward, his voice cold. "Man, Mr. Carter, step aside. This doesn't concern you." James, deadly calm. "You come after her, it does concern me." Man, smirking. "You're protecting a girl who isn't worth your name, your fortune, or your life." James's eyes darkened. "James, dangerously soft, she's worth everything." And with that, the fight began. Gunshots echoed in the night. James pulled Tina behind a car, shielding her with his body. His men fought back fiercely, taking down the attackers one by one. But one of them slipped through, charging toward Tina. James saw him too late. James shouting, "Tina." Before the man could grab her, Tina grabbed a broken wooden plank and swung it hard. It hit the man's head with a sickening crack, sending him crashing to the ground. Tina stood there, breathing heavily. She had spent her whole life running, afraid. But not anymore. She wasn't just a girl in need of saving. She was James's equal. And she would fight for their love. Soon the last man fell. James's security restrained the survivors, and sirens wailed in the distance. It was over. The victory. James turned to Tina, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She was safe. She was his. James stepping toward her, voice raw, "You're incredible." Tina let out a shaky laugh, tears filling her eyes. "Tina, I don't want to run anymore, James." He cupped her face, his forehead resting against hers. "James, softly, then don't. Stay with me. Forever." Tina smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with love. "Tina, I love you." James, grinning, "Say it again." She laughed, throwing her arms around his neck. "Tina, I love you, James Carter." And as he kissed her, slow, deep, claiming her as his, she knew this was it. This was home. They had fought against the world. And they had won.